Hey guys, welcome to the Big Liberty Show, the Blacks Only episode. This is episode 3, and I'm happy to have you guys tuning in again. I know the show is proving to be quite the popular show. Remember, Blacks Only is us essentially parodying and mocking the race obsession that we see in society, in our media, in academia, and in other facets of society. This weird notion that just because we are all black or we're all white, or whatever the case may be, aesthetically, that according to our opponents, we should think the same, or we are a monolith or a homogeneous grouping. We know this is absolute nonsense. And if anything, this show is proving that, where I have on any given day a panel of and a mixture of liberals, classical liberals, conservatives, and even the household anarchist, who I think you guys really do like. He'll be back next week on the show. I'm in Cape Town today, a different setting, hence I'm not in the studio. I'm actually at the offices of the Frederick Naumann Foundation, the FNF. They are also an organization that deals very strongly in liberal values and promotes it internationally. And this video is, partly in support of those guys who graciously offered up their space to us. And big shout out to them, and thank you, Wayne, for that. Guys, let me not waffle on and on and on. I'm joined by a fantastic panel today. And it's a ladies panel. Not that it should matter, but hey, I'm sure Lefties are already going, oh, ladies. Guys, hello. I'm joined today by Tami Jackson. Tami Jackson, of course, is, should I call you famous or infamous? I don't know what it's now boiled down to. Tami Jackson is part of the Progress SA guys. I encourage you to check their stuff out online. You can find them on Facebook and basically nearly any and all social media. They do fantastic work. In fact, if you go into my videos, one of the videos I did was a talk at UCT, the Young Black Conservative Talk. It's a 2-part video. I encourage you to check that out. So you can also see some of the other guys who are part of Progress SA. And of course, I'm joined by the lovely Unathi Kwaza, who I think most of you remember and may know from her various writing, of course, online, but also from her stint at the ZACP, the Capitalist Party. You guys went for it. And so guys, I'm going to hop straight into it. And what I really wanted to achieve in this discussion, the short chat with you ladies, is let's begin where the story actually does begin, I suppose. Who am I chatting to here? Who is Tami Jackson? Tami, where are you from? Tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Celia, for having me on your show tonight. So my name is Tami Jackson. I am 21 years old. I'm still currently an undergraduate student studying towards a PSoc in politics, philosophy, and economics. I decided to take a break this year from my studies, and I'm currently pursuing an internship at the Western Cape Provincial Legislature, where I do communications and media work. And I'm hoping to do that for the remainder of the year. So I've learned quite a lot this year during my internship, and I'm hoping that it can only go up from there. It
sounds awesome. And trust you me, I think anybody watching can share the experience of having said, excuse me, oh yikes, I wish I can take a break, or maybe many did take a break from university and the rigors of it, especially UCT. Oh my goodness, we'll get into that. Yeah. Tami, this show's called Blacks Only. I feature, of course, a broad spectrum, if you will, of liberty-minded people, from your liberal, and I mean liberal in the international definition, not the American definition, your classical liberal, if you will, your conservative, your libertarian, your anarchist. Tell me, what is your worldview? Am I right in categorizing you, if I can say that, as a classical liberal?
Well, definitely I would say I'm a classical liberal.
Yep.
I mean, I believe in the sovereignty of the individual in society. I believe that everything, or the decisions that we make in life, must always be around the individual and what his or her desires are, where they view themselves in life. And so for me, it was quite easy to be a liberal. I mean, first of all, I'm from UCT,
yes,
and that environment can be pretty toxic when it comes to the politics of identity. So it was quite easy for me to be a liberal. coming from such an environment where regressive leftist politics is the order of the day.
Absolutely.
It was quite easy for me to dislike such politics, mostly because it was centered around racial divide. And then secondly, one of the reasons why it was also easy for me to be a liberal is because I do come from an area called Elsie's River in the Cape Flats, which is predominantly occupied by coloured and black individuals who were obviously quite disadvantaged because of apartheid back in the day. And so I come from a family where a lot of my siblings or family members never really had the opportunity to study, to work where they wanted to work. And so because, I'm a freeborn, so to speak, they call us freeborns. Born frees. Because I'm a born free, I do feel quite grateful that I am in a space where I'm able to determine my own future.
Absolutely.
And just see potential and opportunities everywhere.
Absolutely.
So in terms of my identity, yes, it was quite easy to be a liberal. I think that too often a lot of individuals, especially people of color, perhaps feel like they are perpetually victimized. And that was something that I also noticed quite a lot. I was always very conscious of my environment growing up. So it was that type of mentalities in our neighborhoods that also, I would say, encouraged my worldview in some point. I do think that the possibilities are endless when it comes to rising. And
we'll get to that just now.
Yeah.
I want to bring in our other guest over here, Unathi. Hello.
Hi,
Unathi, for those who don't know and should know, who is Unathi Kwaza? Where is she from?
Right. I'm Unathi Kwaza, as you've said. Currently reside in Khayelitsha. Originally, I was actually born in Worcester, but I left for the Eastern Cape, where my mother was practicing as a nurse. So that's where all my schooling happened until grade 12. And I moved back to the Western Cape, and I've been here since. And my worldviews and what influences them. For me, the classical liberal has been quite it's a fairly new journey in the sense that I've always been aware of politics and from following news and all that from quite an early age. And I can't say like from very early on I was like I would have classified myself as liberal or classical liberal. But what happened with me is I studied food technology at former Pentech. It's now Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And I worked for a while in the private sector until 2008. And I decided that I suppose I've always been interested in business. And I felt that I needed to do something that to manage my time and to be responsible, as Tim was saying, just to see how business works. So I've been doing that since then. But now through that process and through networking, that's when I met individuals like Gareth Blow, Michael Hawili, and they introduced me to INENG, which is Independent Entrepreneurship Group. And from there, and through more workshops and interacting with other individuals, that's where I'm the libertarian and classical libertarian culture started. And I've been learning since then, and I call myself a student of life. It's not your formal education like you go to university, but I feel that I've learned a lot, like outside of the world of work, and that was a new way that I was crafting my career, so to speak. And then from there, I met organizations like Frederick Naumann Foundation, Free Market Foundation, and each and every day I'm learning something new. And it's quite an exciting space to be in because it's fairly new to me. And so there's always a lot of things to learn and hopefully to influence other people on.
Guys, there is a strong common theme that I'm somewhat hearing here. And that is, it's this idea that, look, and I'll ride off of what you said, Unathi. None of us here, including me, are, can claim somehow that, we just came out of the womb and, we were classical liberals, we were libertarian. No, of course not. It's a process of learning, something we all went through. And depending on which spaces you've been in, from university, which Tami described rightly as being rather toxic and leftist and identitarian, to the cutthroat world of, being an entrepreneur and having to pick up new skills, surround yourself with new ways of thinking and people who ordinarily you would never have met, right? We all come into it through some sort of experiential learning, and it awakens our own sense of self. And I'll speak, briefly about my own experience. You then quickly realize that no one owes you anything, that actually you own yourself, you're responsible for yourself and your own life decisions, and that depending on what life decisions you make and how much work you put in, you can be either the very best of who you are or the very worst. And this for me is quite a good theme because I want to ask about where you ladies are from. The Western Cape is often, when you look at images of it, right? It's always the leafy, plush bits of it. The Cape, the sea points. Is it Sea Point or Seaboard? Atlantic Seaboard. It's very seldom you hear then and therefore of individuals, black individuals from the various Cape Flats townships who are liberty-minded or who lean on that side of how difficult or how easy is it for you to be or to advocate for these sort of ideas in your home environment? Or do you even make an effort to do that, Tami?
So I wouldn't actually say it's really easy. I mean, I think when it comes to taking ideological positions, one can argue that sometimes lived experiences are actually relevant. And perhaps a few classical liberals or libertarians may disagree with me, but that's something that I stand firmly on. Lived experience does matter in some case, especially in mine, where that's kind of been my sort of foundation, where the ideology or my ideological thinking really started. So no, it hasn't been exactly easy, but like I said, because I was able to get an education, or I am still currently receiving an education, I didn't graduate yet. So because I was able to be in an environment where intellectual honesty and discussions are constantly taking place, it was easy for me to think out of this box that you get placed in when you do come from a particular community. And so in my community, it's not very easy to speak on certain issues like liberalism, the free market, the importance of the rule of law or constitutionalism, because most individuals who come from those communities don't really know what it means. To them, it's if you want to engage on certain issues, it's mostly just that of, like bread and butter issues. People only care about service delivery, basic human rights, housing, water, those type of basic things. They don't always understand the importance of advocating for certain things like the individual.
If I were to put the question to you, and you can piece this together, right, of your various experiences of people you've met and interact with and live around. If you were to describe the average resident of Elsie's River, how would you describe them? Would you say, if I gave you two options on a spectrum, would you say that person is closer to being an identitarian, in other words, identity-obsessed individual, leftist, big believer, for instance, in the state controlling all aspects of their lives, and absolving themselves of personal responsibility? And you can be honest in this, and we'll get into that depending on what the response is. Or does that individual are they somewhere in the middle? Or alternatively, do they lean on the side of liberty and freedom and those sort of concepts, even if they don't articulate them in an academic way? Because sometimes I think that's the the distinction we need to make. Just because someone doesn't have the academic lingo, and this is where a lot of libertarians also annoy me, their inability to listen to someone and hear the concepts around self-ownership, individual, the primacy of the individual, et cetera, because they don't hear the buzzwords of that, they then assume that individual is a group thinker, identitarian, trendy-Lefty, et cetera, all these words I'm throwing out today. But back to the question, with that sort of prefix in mind, would you sort of characterize a lot of the people you interact with as being either mostly on the sort of identitarian, pro-big government, pro-statism side, if you will, or do you actually experience a lot of the sort of individualist notions coming out from them, but just not articulated in an academic way?
I think it depends on what the topic of discussion is.
Yeah.
So let's say we're talking about identity. So in Elsie's River, I would probably say most individuals are leaning towards the left when it comes to their identity. I think given the current political climate in South Africa, everyone wants to feel like they are part of this group and somehow victimized in some way. And so it seems like some kind of desire to want to have that sense of belonging, that I'm part of a group. And so I think this is particularly special when it comes to colored individuals, is that the narrative has always been centered around black versus white in South Africa. And anyone in between, or any minority group in between, doesn't necessarily see themselves as being part of either group.
And I wanted to get into that, but yeah.
So during, obviously, the past couple of years, you've seen a whole lot of groupings form, like, for instance, Gatful Capetonian or your colored mentality group is just popping out of nowhere, trying to claim their space.
These are specifically racial, nationalist, tinged groupings, though? Yeah.
So I would say that there are a group of individuals perhaps trying to find their space in South Africa in some way, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a good thing. But that's a topic for another day. It depends really what you're talking about. So that's just the identity aspect. When it comes to the more economic aspect or socio-economic aspects, I would say that a lot of people advocate for state intervention without even knowing that they are doing so. And I think this really boils down to how much we really trust the state or government. So if you look at liberals who's been reading a lot on history or just, what happened in the past, part of what makes us liberal is the fact that we are so skeptical about authorities and state power. And so a lot of individuals within Elsie's River, I would say, do advocate for a lot of state intervention without actually knowing it. Let me give an example. Let's say someone's child got missing, which is a common occurrence on the Cape Flats. Kids get missing, they get shot, kidnapped, raped, you name it, everything. Instead of parents taking responsibility or personal responsibility to say that as a parent, it's my duty to make sure that ABC happens, that my child gets an education and is safe, they would rather place the blame on the local councillor in the area, which I do feel is quite unfair, because the job of a councillor is not to look after your child. It's not to be a surveillance camera or a security guard. It's to make sure that basic services are provided. And so people put all of those, or they think that authorities or local government has a responsibility to intervene in that way. So it's these little small things.
But I'm going to push you on some of these, because I think this is the conversation this is actually the conversation, right? Because if anybody then who is a liberty advocate and someone who leans on the side of the primacy of the individual, this is really the battle of ideas that they're engaged in their community. How do you shake South Africans, especially in the communities we grew up in? How do you shake them out of that collectivist belief? Because, as you said, it isn't just it didn't just happen by happenstance. There's a history behind it. I mean, South Africans have never had a time in history where we viewed the individual as being important, whether it was under the colonial era, which created a lot of the racial group identities that we classified as black, colored, and you can go down the line. to apartheid, in 1948, which galvanized them and weaponized them, if you will, in terms of institutionalizing a lot of the racism. You hear a lot of trendy lefties today talk about institutional racism, but really, if you then ask them, can you point to one piece of legislation that actually, well, technically, I suppose you can, but they wouldn't. Let me rephrase that, because I got caught by my own sentence construction there. Under apartheid's very nature was the institutionalizing of racism, right? The idea that there are these different groupings and that they have a group identity. They're not individuals. And based on this group identity, those who have and who hold political power decide where you live, who you marry, who you have sex with. I mean, there were literally cases of cops in trees with binoculars making sure that mixed marriages aren't happening. To all sorts of aspects of the economy, for example, that are controlled, and essentially politicians deciding who the winners and losers are based on race. You've then transitioned from that apartheid era to today's government, which does essentially the same thing, but does it now under the name or the guise of being, for all South Africans. Yeah. But that's why I was saying I got trapped by my own sentence construction, because yes, I can point to a racist, institutionalized piece of legislation today, whether it's, affirmative action, or employment equity, the 96 Act, or even BEE, right? And this is where I'm saying I'm very careful, because obviously lefties wouldn't view that as being racism, but anybody who's actually leans on the side of the individual would. But to bring it back, Tami, you're raising an important bit, because it speaks to the communities we come from, and it speaks to the mission, therefore, of a liberty-minded individual in an environment like that. Unathi, I'm going to pose it to you, because I think we've gotten a perspective of Elsie's River, which is a predominantly coloured community here in the Western Cape. But there is another big community, a black community. Abo, you said you're from Khayelitsha. Talk to me about Khayelitsha. If I'll ask the same question, how would you define, in your experiences and the people the people you interact with, how would you define those people? Is there a big trust for big government intervention in people's lives, controlling all aspects? Are they somewhere in the middle, maybe, where, as Tami says, it depends on what the issue is? Or hey, do you actually find, even if they don't have the lingo, that a lot of people are individualist and hold those sort of liberty type ideas? How do you describe your experience growing up where you grew up?
Let me just take it back even before 1994 and challenge you a bit on what you
just
say.
Before you do that, you just pull the mic close to you.
Okay.
All right, hit me.
That's fine. Oh, yes. What I'm saying is, let me just challenge you a bit on what you said. And I'm thinking back to even before 1994. I feel that as black people, we knew how to take care of ourselves. We knew how to do things for ourselves. We knew that, at least in the household that I grew up in, you go to school, you get an education, and you find a job. And there was really nothing much that one expected from a government, besides the fact that government does the education, the schooling part of things. But basically, it was from your family. That decision was taken from your family. So, and I find that post-94, when this government came to power, there was a lot of promises that were made to people. And those promises, people don't take them, people don't look at the fact that the more government promises you something, they are taking away something from you.
Absolutely.
Because the freedom to decide for yourself, that I'm going to go and find a job, I'll bring up my family and take care of them. I mean, back then, think about it. If by some chance, because it didn't happen that frequently, that a teenager, maybe a teenage boy, will impregnate a girl. But what used to happen is a family would then tell that boy that, look, you have now a child coming your way. You must see to it that you find a job, and because that you have started a family now, you much bigger. But now what has since happened post 94 is that government will do that part for you. And so
let me just,
for some people,
let me put a bookmark there.
Right.
I want to stay with train of thought, but essentially you're making the family versus government argument, right? The idea that historically actually families were very important and that decision making happened within the realm of the family, but ever increasingly since 1994 with the new government, the government has stepped in and really politicians have stepped in to try and play the role of either the father figure in the home or whatever the case may be. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out. Yeah. Talk to me.
No, that's the point I was trying to make. And as I was saying, that people don't understand the fact that sure, government is saying that they will do all these things for you, but in a sense they're taking away your power. Because as an individual, and if you're grown up, like right now I'm running a business, and I don't expect anything from government. I just want policies that they create to make things easier for me.
And to really get out of your way, to be honest.
Exactly, to do that. I am not expecting business from government. I will do that myself because I'm the one who is in that business of doing that. So, in Khayelitsha, just to continue on what Tami was saying about my community in Khayelitsha, people, like there's different kinds of people. There are people who are more reliant on social welfare because of the rate of unemployment and all that. So they end up relying on that heavily. And then there are people who are professionals where I live in Little Park. There are people who are professionals who I don't think they expect much as in. But politically, I would say they lean towards the ANC because, like, just before elections, I met one old lady in the bus, and we were talking about the coming elections, and I asked her who she was going to vote for. And then she was saying to me, she'll vote for Mandela. And, I mean, how do you argue with someone who says that they will? So I was saying to her, oh, okay, but Mandela is no longer here. Are you saying to me that you are okay with his former party, that things have gone where they are? And then she said to me, well, not that I'm happy. It's just that he had plans for us as Black people, and we still have hope that things will be all right. Even if it's not that we are endorsing what is happening now. That you find a lot of that sentiment in Khayelitsha among people, those people who still vote.
So an almost romanticizing
Yes.
Of the ANC versus looking at what the ANC is in the here and now. Looking at, for example, where you began, it's ever increasing, encroaching into personal liberty spaces. And really, look, as conservatives, libertarians, liberals, we speak a lot about the individual, but really we're a family society, and the individual happens within the context of the strong cultural and social bonds we create within families. They are much stronger than the relationships that are forced on us by the state, through various institutions. Guys, I'm gonna pivot this conversation a little bit. In a direction which I think is necessarily controversial. There is a big train of thought that we're seeing today. Tami, you experienced it in the context of university. Unathi, I'm quite happy to admit, or not admit, sorry, but to posit that you likely experienced it on the realm of social media because you have a very big social media following. There is a big train of thought that is dominating South African society right now. And when I say South African society, really social media mostly, and the chattering classes. Those of us who were privileged enough to go to a university and, experience those sort of ideas, because that's where they really emanate from. And then they filter out, of course, into society because the graduates that varsities create. Enter the world of work, they become our journalists, they become our politicians, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I digress. The point I wanted to make is this, and the question I wanted to pose is this. We are in a battle of ideas in this country where it is people like us, arguably, those who lean on the side of freedom and liberty, versus those who are obsessed with race, obsessed with identity markers such as gender, In other words, they view the world through that prism. And they're obsessed with giving politicians and government more and more power to make decisions on behalf of people. Primarily as groups, because we don't really see us as individuals, and specifically as through wielding state power, coercive manipulative power. Having set this question up like that, I want to put it to you guys this way, and I want to see what your response will be. If I were to say to you that, let me rephrase this, because I think might be a bit too controversial. I'm just sort of debating it in my own mind. Okay, let me first pose the question this way. I'm going to be facetious and play the role of a lefty, of an identitarian, and I want you to rebut my ideas in a way in which you view the world. So the first claim I'm going to make is, actually, ladies, all Black South Africans are the same. Our shared experience of 400 years of oppression and slavery and colonialism and apartheid has created a group identity, a shared blackness amongst us, which is a shared experience, a black pain, if you will, which is a common thing amongst us. And that you going against it are just not being black enough. You're coconuts or you're sellouts. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'd say that, first of all, you say that all Black South Africans are the same. Well, anyone would think that when you say that, you'd mean that all Black South Africans think the same, they say the same things, their solutions to problems are the same, their actions are the same. Basically, everything that they do is the same, even if it means that they breathe at the same pace, it's the same, right? Well, I mean, that's false, because firstly, your skin color is not something that you have control over. It's an immutable characteristic that you are born with, something that you did not choose. The same with your gender. So how is it possible for one to be defined by some physical characteristic or the level of melanin in their skin? That should not dictate how you think or see the world in any way. So I find it quite irrational that anyone can link intellect to skin color or actions to skin color. It's just quite irrational, and to be quite frank, it's racist. It's blatant racism.
Oh no, I disagree. I disagree. I can see the white supremacy is strong in here. And Unathi, come on, we're Black, Unathi. Let's prove this colored lady that she's wrong, right? We're both from a township. We're from Kylie. I'm from Mlazi, and it's Kwamashu Lol. You're from a poor background, if I may sort of. Because remember, we're Black. We're all from poor backgrounds, and Tammy just doesn't understand it because she's half Black. Am I not right?
Not at all. I think even before I classified myself as liberal or classical liberal, I have always been individualistic about how I did things. And I don't know if it's because I'm an only child that that was easy for me to do. But as you said, I'm quite, I used to be on Facebook as well, but I'm no longer there anymore. But I'm still quite big on.
It's because Facebook is like an oppressive white structure that imposes white supremacy on you, girl. I see why you left it, girl. You did the right thing.
I mean, on a daily basis, I get abused, and just because I refuse to, I refuse to see myself only as a Black person, because there's quite a lot of things about me that have nothing to do with the skin of my color, the color of my skin, and so I'm forever pushing back. When people try to put me in one box, I quickly jump out, because what I think is important about me is where I've been as a person and what I've learned in my journey of life. And so if you want to reduce all this person in all the years that I've lived into just the fact that when you see me, you see a black person, then it's your loss. And I can't help you there. So it's quite ridiculous, really. The fact that social justice warriors, that's what we call them, or woke people, they will do all their best to I mean, they want a certain, like, if you're black, you must think this way. And if you think that way, then there's something wrong. You, as you were saying, you're not black enough. That's ridiculous.
But no, I'm sorry. I disagree. I'm a trendy lefty. I disagree. You guys are discounting the effects of institutionalized racism and the fact that whiteness is out to get all black South Africans. Whiteness is, and you can even feel it like right now, the walls in here are white. That's because that is meant to be a symbol of how whiteness is all around you and controls all aspects of your society. There are actually papers that have made this argument. Anyway,
Wow.
you know, and you know,
Sad.
because whiteness is in everything we do, right? It's remember, it's also unconscious biases that we go through, right? And all this whiteness is out to get you. I mean, it's going to prevent you from getting opportunities. In fact, whiteness and white supremacy is the biggest stumbling block for the two of you ladies. How am I wrong?
You're definitely wrong.
No, Unathi, you can go.
You're wrong because
I'm really enjoying this, by the way. I don't know if you guys can tell. I'm enjoying this. Channeling my inner black woke identitarian chi up in here. Anyway, do continue, ladies.
no, you're wrong. I don't know why everything has to be about white people. And you think this way just because, you are still oppressed. You're not liberated enough. I'm the most liberated person ever, and I'm not in pain.
You denying the black pain, girl. We see you. We see you taking the black pain away.
And to all this nonsense of seeing black people as victims.
Yep.
I speak out against that because in a way, when you think about it, when people say that they are against racist, white supremacists and all that because they look down on black people and they don't think much about us, you're doing the same thing because you are saying that, you black, you must be a victim and you must be poor. And you can't just be an individual and go about your life and just hustle if you're in business and just go about doing your own life and the way that you want to. What does that have to do with white people? I just don't see it. I don't get it. And if you don't think this way, obviously...
You're a coconut or a sellout or a coon or a...
Yes,
go down the
all
list
all these ugly, silly names that they call us.
Tammy, whiteness is the biggest impediment to your success?
Well, just before Unathi answered your question,
Yeah.
like just the whole description that you gave before your actual question, I think that is like one of the biggest problems of the left these days is our very existence is constantly being described and defined by the existence of whiteness, whatever whiteness is. Or the
It can be
existence of
anything and everything they want it to be honest.
So it's as if we cannot be defined as individuals without the existence of a white individual, which is actually quite sad because it just shows that people who, fall for these cultural Marxist ideas really don't see that individuals actually have agency of their own. And so whatever they do or think somehow always has to be attributed to the existence of whiteness or whiteness, whatever that means, which I do think is quite unfortunate.
There's something, back to regular scheduled C-Claire, there's something intensely dehumanizing in refusing to view someone as who they're telling you they are. And instead, going to a checklist that you've developed with other people who hold that particular identitarian view, if you will, there's something incredibly dehumanizing about basically looking at someone like Tammy Jackson or Unathi Kwaza and going, oh, I don't see that person as the individual they are, with the personality they are, with the cultural influences that they have, with the ideas that they bring to the space. Instead, I view them as a set of stereotypes and tropes that I've sanitized through my own worldview, even though historically they were racist, right? And they're still racist today. In other words, if we were sitting in a bar somewhere during apartheid and there's a sign on the door saying, net blancus or the other spectrum, blacks only, lol, we would have recognized that for exactly what it is, a racist attempt at dehumanizing the people who walk into that space to do something which is everyday, right? To have a drink with friends and blah, blah, blah. Yet today, our ideological opponents have appropriated that very same racism, sanitized it according to their own morality, and now you essentially wield it against the very same people who historically would fight against this, right? Yeah. As we maybe look to wrap up this conversation, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have too, there is something to be said about being able to sit in front of two awesome ladies who are ever increasingly becoming accomplished and are accomplished. I mean, I'm sitting in front of varsity students who are doing things that I didn't study, economics and philosophy and all of that. And a businesswoman who is cutting her teeth in a very tough environment in a country which, our economy isn't doing very well, but you're making it work. There's something very heartwarming about being in front of you two and getting to know who you guys are as individuals and not having to walk in here with a preset conditions around what colored people should be, what black women should be. If you were to paint a picture of your ideal South Africa, what would that South Africa be like? Briefly talk to me about what that South Africa should look like. And before you guys get into that, I just want to quickly do like a very quick thing here. If you can just pull your mic close to you and tilt it towards you. That's what I really need. Because I want to capture this properly. Your ideal South Africa, what does it look like? And to someone who may be watching this show and hasn't experienced this side of black South Africa, if you will, because they're so bombarded by the identity stuff, the work stuff that they see on social media and in traditional media, what would your ideal South Africa look like?
I would say that my ideal South Africa would be one of an opportunity-rich society where government actually has a justifiable role in creating opportunities or an environment conducive to opportunities, where individuals are allowed or given the power to exploit opportunities, again, those very same opportunities, and also resources, so they are able to create a better life or better future for themselves or whatever they deem as fit for themselves and their families. And so that's the ideal South Africa I want to live in, one where people are not held back because they come from a certain background or because they have a certain skin color. I mean, that was apartheid, right? And I don't want to live in a South Africa where that is reintroduced under the guise of redress or race being a proxy for disadvantage, which I do believe is a very dangerous conversation. And I mean, we're currently living in that environment right now. So that's the society I really want to live in. I just want South Africa to be an opportunity-rich society where individuals are allowed to thrive on their own terms and where government does not interfere necessarily in things that they have no role in interfering in.
Unathi, I'm going to pose the same question to you, but I want to open it up just a little bit, because in the past week, here in Cape Town actually, there is a story which captured the hearts of South Africans across this nation, and that's the story of a petrol attendant, Nkosiko Mbele, somewhere in the N2, Shell Petrol's, for Americans, the guy who pumps gas. Yes, we have people who we pay to pump gas for us, yeah. But this chap has, he's working a night shift on a cold Cape Town evening. I'm assuming it's cold because it's pretty freezing right now. And in drives this woman, single woman, white lady in a vehicle. And, she asked for petrol. And as she's filing for her illicit wallet's purse, to get a credit card or cash out, she realizes before they pump the gas that, hey, she doesn't actually have any money to pay for this, for the petrol. This chap, who by all accounts is working a, let's call it a minimum wage job. It's not the most highest paying job. Out of the kindness of his heart and unprompted, unrequested or unasked, recognizes the danger this woman is potentially in of having to drive through a particular stretch of highway here in Cape Town, which is notorious, if you break down on it for, for criminal incidents to happen, which can include rape, being robbed or even murdered. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, or just Google a video online. Sorry, guys. Just Google a video online of Cape Town traffic officer shot at while issuing a ticket. And it's on that very same stretch of highway. Just to give you a sense of, that it's not just, the traditional vulnerable person who get attacked. Even cops get attacked on this particular stretch of highway. Anyway, this guy, for whatever his motivations are, and a good heart is definitely on the top of the list, pulls out 100 Rand, about $8 or so of his, from his pocket, and gives her a little bit of petrol so that she can make it home, and has no expectation of her paying this money back, and makes no demand of her to do this, purely out of the goodness of his heart. And this spoke to the real South Africa, didn't it? So Unathi, maybe as I pose that question, that original question to you again, of what sort of society you want South Africa to be, talk me through what that vision is for you.
Ngosiko's story is a story. I mean, I've been in a situation where a stranger has helped me, and in turn, I have also been in a position where I've been asked by a stranger for help, and I did help. So Ngosiko's story just captures nicely the real South African
Absolutely.
story. The South African who shows kindness, who doesn't need to know who gave birth to you before I help you. Absolutely. Are you related to me before I help you? And we have a lot of those stories, but unfortunately they hardly make it to mainstream media. And I think this one made it because of the power of social media.
Absolutely.
That's when even mainstream guys picked up on it. And for me, the South Africa that I want is that one. And the South Africa I want more than anything even is where education is taken seriously by politicians in power. Because we can say all these nice things and about being liberal and being free and being an individual, and with the quality of education that we have, where just now there was a report that 78% of children in grades 4 or 5 cannot read with comprehension, and if a child by those grades still cannot read and with understanding of what they are reading, it means that they have been failed all those years, that from grade 1 to 4 or 5, they have been failed. And if these children don't get a better education, it means that they will grow up and get to grade 12 and so be dependent on the state. And
there is definitely a link. And let me just quickly jump in here, because you've raised an important issue. In this country, we have legislation which, and you actually also touched on this, that decides winners and losers and decides who gets empowered on the basis of race. It uses race as a proxy. And we've seen how much of a cataclysmic failure that has been, where the policy, well-intentioned, its outcome has been to create a small elite of individuals chosen on the basis of their race, whereas the vast majority of previously disadvantaged and even currently disadvantaged individuals remain on the outskirts. And we make this point a lot here on the show, to say you may have all this well-intentioned legislation like Black economic empowerment, which is accepted now. Race as a proxy for empowerment policies is accepted, unfortunately, across the political spectrum, including within opposition parties, including the DA, and it's a problem because the chap who's sitting in the rain outside right now on a sandy dune somewhere in the Cape Flats in a shack doesn't really see how the continuation of this type of legislation eventually reaches him and gives him a shot at an opportunity, whether it's an income by way of a job or income by way of starting some form of business. He is despondent. He is feeling left out, if you will. Meanwhile, on the same highway he lives next to, past him drive the most expensive German sedans by that same elite, if you will, that same Black as it may be now, that same elite that perpetually benefit from these empowerment deals. There is something fundamentally wrong with that image, is there not? When we continue with the same failed policies, and as Unathi is pointing out, we then don't take the real form of empowerment seriously, which is a good education, giving every individual a shot at a quality education that allows them to be able to pursue their own interests and opportunities in life. So I echo your sentiment that if we're to get the society right, insofar as creating an opportunity society, creating a free society, prosperous society where individuals have the freedom to choose options and opportunities, we've got to get the education right. Guys, yeah.
Are we done? Oh, just one thing. And Sihle, to be living in South Africa in 2019 and hearing stories about children drowning in pit toilets or children drowning while trying to cross a river, trying to go to school to get an education, it's totally unacceptable. And until there's a willpower from politicians that education has to be up there in our priorities. Until we get that right, there's no chance in hell that we'll fix the economy, we'll fix the high rate of unemployment. Because as much as we're saying that there's a lot of graduates who don't have jobs now, but among those graduates, there's still a lot of them who are actually unemployable. And so carrying that certificate that says that are passed and are qualified in this field, it won't help them because of the basics that were not gotten right in basic education. So until we fix that as a country, our future, the future of the young people today, we will keep failing them.
Absolutely. And I think maybe as we move to the final word from everybody, and I'll give you guys a chance, because we've kind of slipped into education, and I want us to flesh this out a little bit. The best way to fix this is to have communities take charge of their own infrastructure and their own services. We cannot continue giving politicians the power to pick winners and losers, and invariably poor people who don't have political clout are the ones who become the losers, and rich people or well-to-do, well-off people who are close to proximity of politicians and the political elites, hey, invariably they do really well in this country. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. Ribbit. Anyway, and we see this, right? And one of the solutions, if you've watched any of my videos, especially the ones where I debate, the ANC guys and the EFF guys, I put one of the solutions to them, or one of the interventions I proposed to them, and I want to put it to you guys too, and we'll touch other areas too. On schooling, I know you guys had a similar thing as the ZACP, the communist, the capitalist party. You can literally take the education budget in this country, which is in excess of about 360 billion rand. You could take the education budget, divide it by the number of parents who have kids in public schools, and get to a figure of between 16,000 and 20,000 rand, which you can, instead of spending as officials, spending as government on poorly performing government schools, place it directly into the hands of the parent and dispense of it in the form of a voucher. Each parent gets a voucher between 16 and 20,000 rand for each of their kids, for them to decide which school they send to their kids. Now that immediately creates a demand, right? Why? Because parents have cash in hand, albeit through a voucher. On the supply side, in other words, the schools that are provided to meet this demand, government can sell a school for as little as 1 rand to an NGO. I mean, you've had NGOs like Equal Education wax lyrical for years and years and years on what should be good education policy, what should be a good school. Now you give these sort of NGOs, you give the private sector, Curo, Spark Schools in Johannesburg, and even just, religious organizations. I mean, we used to have Catholic schools. I know there's down here there are very well-established Muslim schools that provide a quality education. You'd give them the opportunity to buy that school for 1 rand, manage the facility, manage the education, bring in the sort of quality that attracts this market you've created of parents with a voucher. Are these not the sort of ideas we should be, especially those of us who are within poor communities who maybe still stay in the township, Elokshini, wherever, are these not the sort of ideas that we should be pushing into our communities, advocating and having people go, hey, maybe that's something I can stand behind as opposed to a political party or a politician?
Absolutely, Sihle. And that's actually taking power from government to the people.
Absolutely.
Where it belongs. And parents know what's good for their children. And parents know which schools are good. That is why, for instance, I come from Khayelitsha. That is why there will be parents in Khayelitsha who send their children to schools closer to town where they know that they will get a better education than they would in a township. Because in a township, you'll find that there's more of the unionizing of teachers.
Absolutely.
And we cannot take for granted the damage that SADTU has been causing in schools.
SADTU is the South African Democratic Teachers Union. It's a leftist, Marxist-inspired union that essentially has a lot of members in schools and controls the education system, essentially.
I mean, there was also another report that about children, the number of school days that children in public schools attend school compared to those in private schools or former model C schools. It's atrocious, and it should not be accepted that SADTU, a teachers union, can hold so much power. Because at the end of the day, who is suffering? It's the children that are suffering. So we will take that power back from, if we have these education vouchers, it will take the power back to the parents where it belongs, and government will have less say in what happens in schools, and as it should be.
Guys, let's wrap up. And I'm going to give each of you the final word. What I really want on this show is exactly this, is for individuals who lean on the side of liberty, wherever you are on the spectrum. You could be a conservative, a libertarian, a liberal, you name it. I want us to begin to have these conversations that are real, everyday type issues, but viewed through the prism of liberty, how we can improve the standard of living for that chap I spoke of who lives on that sand dune, if you will. And I know you guys in the comment section will be making fun of me about this one example I have, chap on the sand dune. But it's true. In this country, we've begun to desensitize ourselves to the plight of the next man. We now don't see that guy who begs on the side of the road. We brush them off easily. And I think that's a political culture we get from our politicians, who essentially through the bad policy, the leftist rhetoric, are forcing us to not care about the next man because we absolve ourselves of our responsibility to the next man. Because why? We say, oh, government will do this, government will do that, whereas government's not doing that. But anyway, that's another issue for another day on Blacks Only. Guys, final word. And I'll make this a bit of a softer question. And at the end of it, please also punt your social media, how people can reach you. There's something really special about the two of you. And I think it's special also about the other guests I've had here, Mpiake Gamini, Udumo Denga, that I think we need to replicate and share as much as possible. How can people find you? Are you guys writing? Maybe can they find you online? Just share with the folks how we can find you and reach you and engage with you. And of course, from my side, I will happily have you guys back on the show as regular contributors. But how can we find you guys?
So I'm on Facebook and Twitter at TamiJack7. I know it's a very weird handle, but I created that when I was like years ago. I didn't know what I was doing. So it's TamiJack7.
Yes!
And then you can also follow me on Facebook or add me as a friend on Facebook. I'm quite open to accepting. But
girl,
only if you explicitly say that you are classical liberal or liberal, I am very much open to accepting you. Just don't be weird. Because I will
that guy driving a panel van with a mustache is like, yes, I will be adding you.
So I'm on Facebook. I'd like to start dieting soon. I haven't really taken that up yet. I only diet for Progress along with my friend Scott. So you can follow us on our website as well, www.progress.co.org.za. But I'm mostly active on Twitter.
Awesome. I will put this information in the descriptor under the video on YouTube. Unathi, how can the folks reach you?
On Twitter as Unathi_Kwaza. I'm no longer on Facebook.
Heard that early on.
I am also on LinkedIn, although I must say I'm not that active there. I don't actually remember ever posting anything, but I keep seeing.
LinkedIn execs right now going, damn it.
I keep seeing on my email and notifications about LinkedIn, and maybe I should start being active there. I don't know.
Guys?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was about to say, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Blacks Only. And as I said, I'm trying to really build the show to be one where we will have regular contributors. If I'm down here in Cape Town, I can call on you two. And that third spot, the spot for the third guest will be someone who is contrarian to what we believe, right? So it will be the trendy lefty. It will be the race hustler, the race pimp, the identitarian. And they can now come up against, debate-wise at least, against those of us who lean on the side of liberty. And we can have this debate out, which is something you don't see in traditional media. But, you guys can look forward to that. And thank you guys for joining me. And thank you for joining us on the show. I really am wholly dependent on you guys, both in terms of you watching the content, sharing the content. And remember, the Big Liberty Show is here for you guys in the various iterations, whether it's Big Daddy Liberty vlogs or the Big Liberty Show Blacks Only, or actually the Big Liberty Show itself. It is you, the guys who watch every week, who make the show happen. Guys, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. I do read your comments, yes, every single one, even if I don't respond, and I do appreciate the interaction. And remember, guys, I'm also dependent on you for support to keep the show going, to get me around the country, to be able to meet awesome people like Tami and Unathi. By supporting the show financially, please consider becoming a friend of the IRR. That is our crowdfunding campaign, where you can donate 90 Rand every month, or between 70 and 90 Rand every month. And you can do that by, SMSing your name to 32823. An SMS will cost you 1 Rand, and terms and conditions to apply. Or maybe you're one of the born frees and you're thinking, SMS, what is that? You can find us online at irr.org.za/join, and you can sign up for a debit order there. Guys, remember, do keep watching the show and share it. Please share it with your friends. Let's grow this channel and get these ideas out there. Guys, you've been watching Blacks Only on the Big Liberty Show.